Greetings hobbyists, this is Arsan's of Vol, and this is the Ender 3 v3, and it's just out. Let's take a look at what it can do. So let's blitz off some stats about this 3D printer so we can get an idea of what we're talking about. First, it's got a pretty respectable build volume, nothing massive, but also something that's big enough to do anything you want, so unless you're printing off full-on helmets to put on your head, it's pretty much going to cover your needs. It's got a layer height of between 0.1 and 0.35mm, so that's capable of doing some pretty fine detail, and a printer accuracy of 0.2mm. It's also got a printer speed of somewhere up to about 600mm a second. And I'm going to be honest, to me, all of that means absolutely nothing. Not that I don't understand what it means, but that's not the thing I really care about. Because this is going to be my first filament or FDM printer. And what's got me concerned about that is when you go online and watch videos about filament printing, they're all about how you can tinker with your printer to get better or faster results, and that's not what I want. I want something I can get out of the box, click some buttons, and it's going to print first time, without me having to take up a new hobby of fixing or tinkering with my 3D printer. So if that interests you as well, watch on. Otherwise, you've got the stats. I'm sure you could tinker with this to your heart's content to make it even better, so go knock yourself out. Otherwise, let's see how this works out for an FDM novice and how easy this thing really is to use to get good results. So let's start with the out-of-box experience. You are going to have to put some bits together because otherwise the postage would probably cost you 3 times what it would, but it's really nicely packaged. Nothing's going to shift around as it's being transported, so you've got no issues there. And when we start getting it out, there's some things to straight away notice. First of all, the printer nozzle is actually attached to the crossbar, which is great. A lot of printers seem to have that as a separate part, so less putting together there. All you've got to do is put on the main arm, which just screws in with 8 screws, really easy. I was also pleased to see that compared to some cheaper printers, there are 2 metal guiding rods, which if my resin printing knowledge is anything to go by, should really help with reducing shift as it's moving around and giving a more accurate print. Then we put on the main screen and then connect up a few cables where you can't really go wrong because they're all specifically different sizes, so you almost don't need the instructions. But I will say, there are very clear instructions, and if you've done anything like putting together an IKEA cabinet, this is going to be pretty easy. The only thing that it didn't mention in the instructions, what I thought was a bit of an oversight, is that when you turn it on for the first time, it's going to go and do all of its auto-leveling checks, so you just need to wait for that to happen before you put the filament in for the first time. And you know what? That's great that it does all the auto-leveling for you. No fiddling around with bits of paper or anything like that. It's going to do this automatically in a really carefree process, and that's exactly what I want. Then you've got a USB in the box, and I thought I'd start by what seems to be the standard of printing off the benchy that is already on there and sliced for you. And I have to say, being used to resin printing where you can't see a lot going on, watching this was really cool, and admittedly I did basically stand and stare at it for the 13 minutes it took to print off this benchy. And to me that seemed pretty fast. You're not going to get anything this quick with a resin printer. Everything adhered to the build plate really well. Yeah, when it was time to get it off, the flexible build plate just made that a breeze. Now having a look at this, I don't know what layer height this was sliced at, and there are some layer lines on it, but it's a filament printer, you kind of expect some layer lines. Or at least that's what I thought, so what happened next was a pretty big surprise for me, I'm going to be honest. Now like a lot of people, my main reason for wanting an FDM printer was to be able to print scenery. You're going to be better off for really small scale models generally with a resin printer, but terrain takes a lot of hits, so you're going to want something as resilient as possible, and that's where FDM really shines. So I found one of these sci-fi wall sections online and threw it into the Creality print software. Now, at this point, I didn't have access to anything like Cura, which a lot of people recommend, because there isn't a setup for this printer, so I just thought I'd stick with Creality's own software. I stuck with the quality layer height, which is 0.2mm, and then got printing. And again, with no more input from me, no tinkering, I got a result I was really happy with. But then I thought, well, why not put it to its maximum test and put it down to a layer height of 0.1mm? So you're talking 1/10 of a millimeter, and to a level that's not particularly far off what a resin printer can do. And as I said, these results really stunned me. There is not much in terms of layer lines here. I will say that there are points where you get this sort of slightly candy flossy texture on the outside as the nozzle pulls away from where it's printing at that point and moves to another area, but that's easy enough to brush away with your finger, and I don't think this really detracts from how fantastically plug and play this printer really is. And compared to resin printing, that's great. There's just no cleanup. For example, this evening I needed a 40mm base and just didn't have one, so threw one in and 7 minutes later I'd got one ready to go. Absolutely no cleanup required. Now, one other thing I do want to mention, because it's on Creality's website for this, and I didn't get a chance to test it out just with what I was doing really, is that apparently the fan on this is particularly good, which means you get less issues when you're doing overhangs, because it cools the plastic before it has a chance to, what I would guess is sag, and therefore you're going to need less supports, though the Creality print software does seem to do the tree supports that you want very easily, but less supports means less printing time, so what's not to like there? I did print out this ruined wall section, and that turned out really well, and there are, I guess, a few overhangs here on things like the ledges. So are there any downsides to this printer? Well, I'm noticing one notable one, and that's there's a load of cool add-ons available, like this camera. I mean, I haven't had any failures, but it'd be useful to know if it was happening, or things to keep my filament dry. I mean, I haven't actually experienced that either, but surely I need these things. And I mean, I'm saving money by printing my own things instead of buying them. Like, that base cost me, I think it's going to work out as 3p. So surely more gadgets is just a wise investment. Well, anyway, I hope you found the video useful, and if you do want to check the printer out, there's a link in the description. If you do want to say thanks for putting out the review, a hit on the like button is always really appreciated, and have a great day.